What's going on, everyone? It's Phil with Mastercrafted. I've brought John along, and we're here to talk about some new chapter approved 2526 and what you need to know and learn and pay attention to for playing the new mission. So this is a purely tactical sense of what the new chapter approved 2025-2026 is going to look like for you as a player, because I think John and I both agree that there is some significant changes that you need to take into consideration when you're list building, when you're planning for your game and you're getting ready to go, and some things that I would say we have concerns about, right? About what the game is going to look like. So get your notepad out, get ready to take some notes and pay attention, because we're taking you to school and we're going to teach you how to play 40K a little bit better. John, how you doing, man?
Good. What's up, Phil? Yeah, thanks for having me. Definitely an exciting time to be playing 40K. I love, one of the best things about 40K to me is that they're constantly switching things up, throwing us curveballs. We have new challenges to kind of overcome and think through and optimize. So definitely excited to chat a little bit through kind of how we're optimizing and how I'm kind of thinking about a lot of those things that you mentioned, especially around list building, I would say is the first step, and just honestly how to attack kind of when a new mission deck is presented. How do I go about figuring out what is optimal, as opposed to, that can be different from taking an objective look at it, is when you actually roll some dice and see what it's like. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we'll rip the Band-Aid off. So, like I said, hopefully you guys got your notes out. You're ready to pay attention, and no slacking off and no sleeping in the back of class, because we will know. The first thing that I want to talk about is the new secondary missions, because I think for me personally, that has the biggest impact in terms of the decisions that I'm making in terms of my list building step. So one of the main ones, we lost containment. That for some armies was for Tau, for Gene Stealer Cult, it was pretty much guaranteed. You would never ever stop me from getting containment. It's 6 points. It's an awesome secondary, especially if I get it turn one, especially in some of these layouts where I didn't even have to risk anything to do it. So containment is now gone. And it's been replaced with a few other secondaries and changes to some other secondaries that I think are super important. And I've played I've played 5 games of the new chapter approved 2526. So I've been running them as many times as possible, because I'll be going down to Austin to play in the GT down there. So I'm looking forward to that. But one of the things that stands out to me in terms of the secondaries that impact me the most is Bring It Down has now been capped. And for me as a player, now all it matters is I kill one monster vehicle, and it's 4 points. It doesn't stack. So armies like Chaos Knights, like Imperial Knights, DG vehicle spam, and all of these things with big greater demons. Bring It Down used to be like Boogeyman out there, and now it's gone. So in terms of me for list building, that almost frees up a few options that I didn't necessarily take before. What about you, John? What about these secondaries that stands out to you the most?
Well, 100%. I think that's a really great call out. For Bring It Down for Tau specifically, we run lots of vehicles, as within the list building, and I think that it really helps to not have the opportunity for your opponent to randomly Bring It Down on the wrong turn for you. I've given up 10, 12, 14 points even sometimes, so it's nice that within list building I don't really have to worry about it too much, and I can kind of just put as many vehicles as I possibly want into my list. But for me, I think this is a subtle change. You mentioned the change to containment. Also adding in a display of might, which I would say what I'm about to say isn't as relevant for, but tempting target being added to it is the game is now funneling you even more towards midfield objectives. So when I think about list building for Tau specifically, I'll give you an example of a unit that I think in most attachments I'm going to want to bring at least 2 of, and that's Breachers. Because they're one of the few things within the Tau range that effectively attack staging points and denies primary at the same time. So knowing that attempting target's added into the mix and containment is gone, again, you're going to be playing more so for the midfield objectives even more. Although it's small and subtle, I think it is important to call out that it has become just a little bit more relevant.
Yeah, I think that is a huge part of it, right? So recover assets now scores immediately. That for me is a big deal. That is one of those secondaries that can be really, really tough in terms of primary scoring. The midfield brawler type is definitely in my wheelhouse. So my Custodes with my big bricks of wardens, they love brawling in the midfield, being able to deny primaries because they're all 3 OC with the banner. My Plague Marines love brawling in the midfield because they don't have a lot of movement, but the Rhinos get them where they need to be. And I think overall, you're absolutely right. Those midfield objectives are even more important. Primary missions like Ritual. I don't know if you guys have looked, but Ritual, those 3 objectives in the middle, they don't disappear anymore. Those stay there. And you build objectives off of those 3 that are now stationary. So we're talking, I mathed it out with some of the 40K Fight Club guys and some of the layouts. I can get 5 objectives on my side. So 5 plus the 3 in the middle, plus my opponent's 5. Like, that is an obnoxious amount of objectives. But a mission like Ritual, where you only get points for holding 3, like, that is going to be a very interesting thing. I do appreciate the fact that I don't have to pick objectives. That was kind of a pain, but that is now, I think we're going to see that mission more often, because I played it and geez, that was annoying. It was very, very annoying, especially because you're just trading all the time.
Yeah, well, tell me about that, Phil. Like, I'm curious because one thing that I'm thinking about is the first and second turn must matter a huge amount, because going second, you're automatically scoring that 15 at the end. If you're going first, your opponent has the chance to deny over and over again and hold out for the 15. So yeah, tell me kind of about like how that game transpired. Like, how did that all go down? Were you first? Were you second? Like, what was your strategy, like from a macro perspective?
Absolutely. So I played into World Eaters, into the Demonkin detachment, which we talked about it during our review of that codex. I genuinely believe it is the best detachment. Like, it is the highest skill cap, but that one strat of being able to drop bloodletters 9 inches away and no restriction on engagement range wherever they want to go after something dies is insane. That is an insane strat for a unit that is relatively good. They're not going to kill anything super big, but geez, will they dice up like your infantry? They'll kill plague marines. They'll go whatever they need to go. So I went second in that matchup into Demonkin, and my opponent was able to get the objectives initially and really set the tempo for the game. I had one moment where I was able to get in, charge, knock my opponent down to 10, and I did that on the following turn as well. So turns 4 and turns 5, my opponent only got 10 for primaries and I got 15. And then on the first 2 turns, my opponent got 15 on each one and I got 10 on each one. So we were able to like even out on primaries. The problem was with the tempo of that game, my opponent was able to get secondaries a lot easier than I was, because I was constantly trying to make sure that I had to find my opportunity to keep them under 15. I would say it was next to impossible for me to keep them, like to knock them below 10, genuinely. Anything that you put close to World Eaters, especially with the Forge Fiends and all that stuff, like is going to die. So I had 2 opportunities and I used both of them to deny my opponent primaries to knock them down to 10. But even then, it's not just, I can't just knock them off one objective, because like I said, you could have 5 objectives in your home field and my opponent had 4. So they had those 4 plus the 3 midfield ones. So it took a lot of work. I knocked them off 3 objectives to get them to go down to 10, because they had so many that they had stacked. So it was very, very difficult. I was able to have an opportunity to win it at the end. It was 95-94 in my opponent's favor. I went to fall back with a Foul Blight Spawn. They overwatched with a Forge Fiend. They killed the Foul Blight Spawn, which denied me getting max for engage. So it would have ended 96-95 in my favor. But the Foul Blight Spawn died to Forge Fiend Overwatch, which is understandable. You know, that many shots, rerolling, just, you know, picks up Plague Marines pretty well. I was hoping, but I mean, that's an insane scoreline, 95-94. And I think in Ritual, we're going to see scorelines like that. And I'll be honest, if you're not a midfield brawling army, you just lose that matchup, I think. If you can't get in there and trade off multiple objectives, like Wardens can do, like Plague Marines can do, like World Eaters can do, Emperor's Children probably is in that, like, they're just going to sit on their objectives and say, okay, you knocked me off 1, but I still have 4 more that I'm on. Are you going to be able to knock me off all of these? So, geez, it was a tough matchup, and I'm glad I got to see it, because that is one of the ones we're playing down in Austin, and I like opened my eyes to like, man, I need more units for actions, because that's another thing for rituals. Like, now I need to stack more objectives if that's a mission that we're running. And holy cow, it was something else.
That's a great call out for like list building in preparation for an event. You know that this mission is going to be specifically on within this, 5-round, 6-round GT that you're going to. And if you're trying to go, X and 1, X and O, you got to have a plan for that mission, especially knowing that it's going to be such a high scoring one. And you're going to have 2-3 units a turn that are just going to be sitting on objectives that your opponent can interact with, but those units probably aren't able to interact with your opponent either. So inputting and building into those lists, those 3 or 4 objective holders, will be super important to like giving yourself a chance through those, very specific missions.
Yeah. But there's some armies that I think are going to struggle with that because they don't have the points to do it. One of my fears is my Custodes. Yes, they have the capabilities to go out there and trade, but do they have the capabilities with the amount of units that they have to generate objectives, do action secondaries, and things like that can actually swing the game in your favor? It's going to be, I'm not going to say a bad for them. Custodies are still very good. I'm very happy running them. I'm very confident with them, but geez, that would cause me a little bit of strife. And that mission, Ritual, is a day 2 mission, and it's it's day 2. Let's see here. Yeah, first mission of day 2. So let's say I go 3-0, right? Like, you're running out of people that are like not as experienced, and you're running into people that are like tooled up, ready to go. The list, you're not going to find a list that isn't ready to handle those sort of things. So you can't make mistakes there. And Ritual is one of those things that might catch some people out.
And you know what the biggest issue with Custodes is?
What's that?
It's not Death Guard. That's the biggest issue, Phil. That's the very problem. Well, I think you make a good point, though, right? Like, the 15 Warden archetype is so lean on units, and it's such a core part of the reason that army works right now, that building into it enough scoring units to do that amount of actions requires you to take 5 or 10. Even 10, it's like, how many units are you really getting out of that? Are you taking like 1 guard unit with an Inquisitor then, and then 2 Sisters units in addition? That doesn't feel better to me. It just kind of feels like you're over rotating on the one mission, and you're building the list to go X and 1, and you're accepting that, hey, that one mission, I hope I play a shitter, and I hope that I hope I get lucky. I'm completely rolling the dice. Like, I'm assuming that's a loss, and if things go well, then it's amazing.
Yeah, John, you and I have talked about it multiple times. I have a mentality when I'm building lists. I build lists to beat the equal skill or higher skill players, and then I'm not building lists for like the skews or equal skill or lesser skilled players, because I'm expecting my skill to be able to overcome those matchups, and I need the list to be built in a certain way so when I go into the top players, I actually I have a chance, which is what I'm going for. I would like to have a chance to go 6-0. But that takes time, and that takes practice, and to understand what it is your army actually does. So like you said it before, it sounds it sounds kind of mean, but my Death Guard are very good right now, and has nothing to do with me as a player. I am a pretty good player, but my Death Guard allows me to punch up even when the matchup necessarily isn't in my favor. So like, we're talking about units that have fights first, units that have Flamer Overwatch, units that can do tricksy stuff to prevent those reactive mobile armies from getting away. I have a unit that is heavy Blight Drone that is it's just too good for the points, and you're never not going to take it. And being the unit that it is, it's always going to go out there and be effective. And when your whole army can be effective, that's a pretty good feeling, that I don't have to like dig for something or anything like that. Even my Chaos Spawn are effective, right? Like, they can go great into matchups, and they're so tough. They're T7. They got a 5-up Feel No Pain. Like, sometimes they just don't die, and that sucks. For a lot of armies that have to ration, like Tau, ration their resources a little bit more carefully, because this resource only goes into said thing, and I cannot lose it before it at least gets an opportunity to go into that.
That's a great point. Well, I'm curious, like, in your game, in your practice games, I've only had one practice game since the deck came out. I went on a little vacation, yada, yada, yada. But I'm curious, like, how impactful have Challenger cards been for you?
In that Demonkin game, I had a huge one that allowed me to add D6 movement to my move characteristic. So it pretty much gives me advance and charge, but better, because it allows me to shoot with all of my weapons. So I was able to do that on my big 10-man Plague Marine squad to get them within range. And that was one of the opportunities I had to deny my opponent primaries. So that's what, like, because I was down a little bit in that game, and that's what allowed me to claw my way back in, because they moved 4 inches in addition, and then shot, and then charged. Like, that was a huge moment in the game. And without that Challenger card, I would not have made it. And I probably would have, like, been further away from an opportunity from winning that game. But then I've had a few games where they were not close, so it didn't matter the Challenger cards that they had. Like, they were already too far behind. I personally don't like them because of the randomness of it, I would say. because there are some that are just like the stratagem is just like worthless. It's not good either in the moment or whatever. But some of them are like game breaking because it's like it does give
Mm-hmm.
advanced charge. It gives D6 movement. It allows you to pull a unit back in a deep strike. Like we're talking about things that could really, really alter the state of the game. And if I manage to like be 6 behind and pull this challenger card that I need or one that's going to benefit me greatly, it can be devastating.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I want to get back to that, but I'm curious. Have you ever planned within your turns? You're mathing it out. Okay, like if I score the secondary, I'll be up by, up by 7. Maybe if I just do baby instead, I'll only be up by 4. Like, are those considerations you're making turn by turn to say, hey, you know what? I don't want to give my opponent the chance to break this game open with something like moving a freaking, tank through a wall or something crazy like that.
Sure. I haven't. So I think the risk of denying yourself guaranteed points does not, like, that is not worth whatever it is that they're going to pull, because they could pull something that's not worthwhile. They could pull something that, like, maybe only gives them 1 or 2 victory points because they can't get the third one or whatever the case is. I would be very hesitant. And like, I don't know, it has not stood out to me in any moment where I'm like, oh, if they get this one challenger card, this will break the game open right now. But I think maybe in closer games, it will. It hasn't stood out to me. It's not something I've thought about, mainly because I am still trying to max my points, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I guess back to like the discussion on just challenger cards from like a design perspective, I would tend to agree that I don't like it. I think the issue for me, the thing that I don't like about it, which is like a competitive player issue, is now I have to memorize like 8 different things to play around in a close game at the end of the game that could be the difference between me winning or losing, right? And so that's like the level of detail that you have to go to like be the best player possible. It's not only like having a expert understanding of your army and your matchup spread and the hundreds of detachments that are in the game today and what you might be facing. Now maybe you only really need to know like 10 or 15, but still that's a lot of information. Now you have this added layer and mechanic that is, for a competitive game, seems very antithetical, right? We're playing to win the game. Why are we rewarding people for actively losing it? So to me, it's frustrating that GW keeps kind of coming back to this mechanic because, and maybe this would be GW's argument against me, but like players who are going to lose by 50, we're going to lose by 50 anyways. You know what I mean? Like, it's not helping. I think it's targeted to make people feel less bad about getting stomped in games of 40K. But really what it's doing is it's creating an element of randomness in close games against competitive players, in my opinion. And I feel like that's bad for what is a competitive game at the end of the day.
I mean, you have the randomness of the secondary cards, which, like, I know plenty of people have gotten burned on by those before, which I can confidently say has hurt sometimes when you're like, man, I just don't need them to pull this 2-card combination, and they pull that 2-card combination, and it's like, well, fuck, I'm about to give up like 12 points right now because they got everything that they wanted. But you're right, when we add too much randomness to a dice game that's already random, like where is the cutoff, where is the line in the sand? I thought there was a possibility that the majority of tournaments, and this may still happen, where they just say, nope, we're not going to do challenger cards, right? Like with enough feedback, they'll be like, it's just too much, right? We have our randomness, and we will work our variables as much as possible, because dice, you can work variables, right? I can make myself +1 to hit. I can give myself reroll hits. I can plan for those things and actually affect it. But that challenger card, the only way I can plan for it is either taking less points to make sure that my opponent cannot draw one, or like being so far ahead, which sometimes into good opponents you're just not going to be able to do, to make sure that the challenger card doesn't have an actual impact on the game. So it is an interesting mechanic. I am not sold on it personally. I didn't like the previous cards in the same mechanic. Yep. They had secret missions. They've never stood out to me in terms of something that should be valuable. Now, to be fair, they've always been bad. I would have much preferred them to see more of an effort put into fixed missions. I think that would have actually been better received, especially if your point is like, oh, we want to help newer players get into the game more. I think fixed missions actually help more, because you can build your list and plan to take fixed missions. And if they're good fixed missions and it means that you're going to be in the game, that means there's one less thing you're going to have to worry about, one less random variable you're going to have to plan for, because it's like, nope, I just need to do these 2 things every round. And as long as I do these 2 things, we are good to go. But my initial thought on fixed missions for chapter approved is they probably still aren't as good as going tactical.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it just feels weird, like, to your point, like even with secret missions, but like losing on purpose, like actively trying to like lose points, like it just feels so odd to me in a game where the whole goal is to score more points to your opponent. You're doing it in like an ass backwards way. It just seems so silly, just from like a basic design perspective.
I don't get it. I don't understand. But we will press on. So we've talked about the secondary missions. We've warned you guys that you need more action units probably than you expect, and that's the one thing I've noticed that I've felt in all of my games. Like, man, I just feel like one unit short. I just need something a little bit more to make sure that like I can do the things that I need to do, and I can go out there and be aggressive in the ways that I need to be aggressive. So those have definitely stood out to me. We've talked about a few of the primary missions that have changed. What do you, John, when you look at like what the meta is going to look like going forward? We were talking about it before the show. T-Suns look kind of vicious. Death Guard, unfortunately, they got love tapped. They didn't even get knocked down. They got their Death Shroud Terminators are now like mildly reasonable in the sense that they can't rapid ingress 6 inches away. But I still have a unit that has Lance, lethal, sustained, a 3 damage character, and a bunch of 2 damage attacks that I can, champions, I can give just 5 up crits if I want. I could do full hit and wound rerolls. Like, this army is lethal. What else are you scared of, or you think that in the meta is going to be a standout going forward?
Yeah, I think T-Suns is going to be really strong. I played my first rep into Grand Coven last night, and similar to Death Guard, they're just spitting out crazy rules. +1 to hit and wound out of rhinos, dev wounds for the entire army on psychic attacks. Well, everything psychic, so why even like put that stipulation in there? That's just like complete silly town. The bow unit that just gets to sit in the back and shoot you for free. So you're both playing around a unit that can shoot you for free and also trying to pull units out of rhinos at the same time, which is a really different play pattern that I'm used to. I mean, very complex, because then it's, first a Mutolith goes out on an objective, right? You can auto-see it for a turn, but the Mutolith's not going away. And then they park a Rhino on the objective with a bunch of Marines on it. And they're shooting you with 10 bows that have reroll hits, right? So it is a new play pattern for me to try to identify how I can attack that type of a list. Now, I was telling Phil before the show, but I played my first game of Retcad yesterday. I actually took out a Forge Fiend and 2 Mutoliths with broadsides. I hadn't lost anything in my army. I lost 0 units. I stepped out 5 crisis units because I was like, you know what? Let's see how durable we are. One of them was on an objective, 2 weren't. A Rubric squad, 1 shot each of them. Threw 4 up invulns. It's just like, also, by the way, while I'm here, I'm just going to shoot a bunch of bows at a broadside, give them extra AP, and just 1 shot at a broadside. Okay, cool. So like the level of damage is just insane. It's, as a Tau player, I just don't even think it's worth skewing towards durability. At the end of the day, we're going to be a glass cannon army, and what we need to do is capitalize on being able to pull units out and then deliver the pain when we can, and understand that unit it is a trade. That unit is going to die in return. So I think those 2 for sure. We're going to see a lot of Blood Angels, which is another element that's really interesting for Tau, because now all of a sudden our screens are much less helpful, right? Because they just have a bunch of jump units that are just going to fly over our screens. So I think those are the top 3 for me, and NIDS is going to be a really strong one as well. I think basically to me, the new NIDS detachment is teleporting guns. That's kind of how I'm reading it. I don't see it as much of the, teleporting the Raveners and whatnot. It's going to be teleporting Execrants, teleporting Tyrannofexes, and a Trigon Prime who's going to ruin your day. Those are all, to me, very different problems to solve for. So it'll be interesting to get more reps into those lists, come up with a plan. To your point, Phil, it's like, I first need to understand what are Tau's limitations, and then understand, are these winnable matchups if I tech for them? If so, is it worth my time? Is this going to turn this matchup from, them being favored to me being favored, depending on how I build it in list building? Or is this just a horrible matchup that's not worth me teching into because it'll ruin the rest of my matchup? So those are kind of the considerations I'm thinking about as I'm setting up to play practice games, and kind of how I'm attacking the practice games themselves is like, okay, let's test this out. Let's test out how we're going to solve these issues and kind of go from there. What about you? Tell me a little bit about the If there are any other armies that come to mind, or if there's some on that list that you're also thinking about, like, I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, Death Guard is just going to be obnoxious for a bit, unfortunately. They have a win rate and they're winning tournaments at a way too high of a click. It just shows that they're a problem. Thousand Suns is going to be up there. I think World Eaters is so incredibly solid. Especially that Demonkin detachment, but I think Berserker Warband is fine. Like, all of those are still really, really good. I am concerned about CSM. I think they got a little bit of a glow up. I think the new Disco Lords are incredible, and they were already a good army. So, Blood Angels, as we said, already just got better. Those definitely stand out to me the most. I was just talking to a buddy of ours. Well, I was talking to a buddy of ours about like Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights. We're still waiting on those codex, but as of right now, they are still a concern, and they have enough bodies in OC to cause problems in some of these matchups. Now, Imperial Knights more so because they have the sisters and they can strip cover and they can do all those things. So it is concerning. Necrons, you were saying, we were speaking earlier, they got a bit of a glow up in terms of points drops.
Why, GW? Why? What are we doing? Not the Wraiths. Anything but the Wraiths. Buff everything else but the Wraiths.
Yeah, so we'll probably see bricks of them back. I think Drakari, and with Inari being gone, Reaper's Wager. I know Nick talks about them a lot, and we played a few practice games before Inari came out, and I do think Reaper's Wager is a problem. I think it's something that you're just gonna have to some matchups you're just gonna lose to. In terms of how I tech into the actual bad matchups, it's about having flamers. Lone Op, I think, is almost like mandatory. Looking at these new terrain layouts and mission layouts is like, you have to have it somewhere. Like those stupid bows on discs, the goats on discs with bows.
They're dumb.
They will pick out characters. And they'll pick out full units because they're 2 damage a piece. And if they stack
With
the
full
AP
hit
on there
rerolls.
and they give they give full hit rerolls, then it's just like, what don't they kill? You gotta have Lone Op. You cannot be in this game, I would say, and not have Lone Op with the amount of mobility that's in some of these armies and the shooting capabilities at longer range. Now, I will say, I don't think I need any shooting above 36 inches. I think that's the max that I would feel like I need to have, because in 36, I can go like corner to corner across the middle objective and hit things that I actually need to go after. And I don't need much more than that. So I think that close quarters, brawling type armies like Blood Angels, like Death Guard, even T-Suns are just getting better and better because they have cover and ways to get to the midboard really, really safely and not have to trade units prior to that point.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I'll be honest, I haven't looked specifically at the layouts, but one thing I have heard thrown around in the Tau community, which I am considering, I like the sound of it, is triple Ghost Keel. Now, the reason for triple Ghost Keel is now that you get a Stealth Suit Guide into something, you're shooting 3 Ghost Keels with 301's hit and wound, which previously they were never really getting any of those Stealth Suit Guides. Usually your top 3 damage dealers would be like Broadsides, a Hammerhead, a Riptide, and so that unit you typically wouldn't do that, but especially with just how elite the meta currently is and how good 3 damage is, I think there's an argument for running that. You can, Monkai, you can put Strategic Conqueror on, so you get +1 OC, so then you got 12 OC on your natural. You got like a little castle. The only issue is it's just not good into melee, and it's a melee heavy meta. Maybe, I don't know, that's one of those things I'm gonna have to test out into like DG, for example, and feel out what that actually looks like. But it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I'll have to come up to Denver. We'll get some games in.
Yeah, man, you're gonna kick my butt, dude. I don't know about that.
Yeah, so preparing for what happens next for you as a player, standing out there watching this video, there's some really important things that you need to understand. The game has not necessarily drastically shifted as we've seen in the past. It has been tweaked slightly. We've already talked about Bring It Down and the changes made there. We've talked about the primary missions. There are a few. Display of Might is a very important secondary mission that is, for some armies, pretty much guaranteed to score. My GSC will score that, no problem. My Death Guard have no problem scoring that into some matchups because when we brawl in the midboard, usually I'm alive and you're dead. And I have a few extra units, but then there are things like Established Locust is still there, right? That still gets extra points for being in your deployment zone. Recover Assets has changed. There is now a significant amount less of times that we will have to do actions, right? Just losing containment in and of itself and getting display of might. We went from an action secondary to a non-action secondary. Recover assets being changed. Now we went from a secondary that I have to wait a full round for to it's done right now, which is huge. All of those
So
things
one
causing
thing I'm curious
changes. Go ahead.
one thing I'm curious about, just like sorry to interrupt, for like recover assets is can you still charge after you do that? Does it complete immediately or
After
does it complete at the end of the turn?
end of the turn. So you would not be able to charge.
End of the turn, okay. Got it. 'Cause containment you used to be able to. Anyways, but yeah, you make a great point. Like sorry, I knew you were riffing there, so keep going.
It's all good. You as a player need to understand that like your plan for doing secondaries is even more important now because the challenger cards can make an impact in a close game. These primary missions have changed slightly and those are going to look a little bit different and the layouts have changed as well. So like for me, I was doing my counts. I have it right here. In terms of total units, I have 18 units in the current Death Guard list that I'm looking at, but I have a few more that are like closer to 20 because I've constantly felt that I need more tradable pieces because of some of these missions and some of these secondaries, also caused by some of these layouts. Now, is that very high? Yes, absolutely it is. My custodians have nowhere near that, and that's probably part of the reason where I feel like I'm missing out on something in that army, because the whole point of that army is like I just shove 3 guards warden squads in your face and say, can you kill him? And the answer is yes or no, and it's usually no. But with Death Guard, with world leaders, anyone that's got -1 damage, it's miserable. It's fine for teams because I got every matchup that I wanted, but like in a singles format, like you put -1 damage to me, I have to do a lot of work to get around it. Yeah, and all of these armies have -1 damage. Death Guard do, world leaders do. That armies I'm expecting to see at the top of the meta.
18 units in DG is obscene. That is obscene.
Yes, it
How are
is.
you getting 18 units in there? That is banana land. But yeah, you make a great point. And I think for folks who are watching who are thinking about like, okay, how do I attack this? Bottom line, you can make your own educated guesses, but you need to get reps. That's the only way you're going to get a feel for how you need to adjust your list building. Like, we can give you guidance here, but you need to go out in the real world. You need to get models on the table. You need to play against the best players you possibly can and figure it out together and have genuine practice games, not as in, not a game where you're both trying to like, I just want to get one over on my buddy and win my one Warhammer game of the week, but let's figure this out. Like, this is a puzzle that we both need to iron out together. And that's going to be the quickest path to optimizing how you're playing this new mission deck, how you're attacking the list building step, because they're, at the end of the day, like, playing is super important, but so is list building. You need to come up with a plan beforehand, and that starts in the list building stage of 40K.
Yeah. I'll give you a peek behind the curtain for my Death Guard in terms of the decisions I make. I start off with a unit of Chaos Spawn, two units of Poxwalkers right off the bat, because one's going to be sitting on my home and I'm infiltrating the other one off of my natural in a way that is not going to be shot turn 1 and can get onto the natural turn 1. So like if I go first and I draw Cleanse, that's the unit that goes out there. The unit that goes out in the middle, well, that's my 6-inch scouting Chaos Spawn. And they are doing that every time, right? I am 6-inch moving them closer. Okay, I got something like area denial and I need to be on the center. Those spawn are the ones going out there. And my plan is pretty much the same every game with those 3 units. I have not deviated from that once. And then the drones that I'm using, they have a specific job, right? They're usually my initial trading piece, the flesh mower drones, not the heavy blight launchers. They're going onto objectives because they have 3 OC, which is a little sneaky, and they are very good in combat, especially if you put any trash out there, and they will go mop things up. Like you put a squad of infiltrators on it, a flesh mower drone will pick up the full squad of infiltrators. And they'll also be on the objective. So even if they don't kill them, it's 3 OCs. So you got to put multiple guys on there to actually knock me off it. So like that is one of the pieces that I'm pretty much always sending to my opponent's natural to look to deny primaries, right? My rhinos are the second to last piece that goes out, right? Because they have my big bricks of Plague Marines in them. And the Death Shroud will fit in where they need to fit in, right? If there's an opportunity or a gap for me to 6-inch deep strike away and make a 6-inch charge, I will take it 100% of the time, especially with the Lord of Contagion. Because if I make that, like, I haven't had one thing that has survived the Lord of Contagion and the 3 Death Shroud Terminators. Not once. Especially when you give them 5-up crits.
Gross.
Yeah, you as a player, you need to decide what that looks like for you. Now, it's different for every army. For John's Tau, right? Like, and I've played into it, I think, twice now. And Matt's Tau in terms of auxiliary cadre, well, they trade differently. They have crude hounds or breacher teams or just crisis suits bricks, but how you're layering those is going to be different for every army. And I would love to give you the answer that's going to solve all your problems, but it's going to be different. If you want to ask those questions, our Discord is always open. You can always leave a comment down in the YouTube comments, and I do my best to answer as many of those as possible. But John makes a great point. You got to play games of 40K, but that doesn't mean like you need to play like I do or John does or Lane does. Like I've played 5 games since the mission pack came out, and that's because I'm getting ready to go down to Austin and I want to be as prepared as possible. But even if you use 1 game a week, and that's your 1 game for the week or for the month, but you work with your opponent and you talk through all these things and you think through all the solutions and you're actually putting meaningful mental energy towards every moment trying to solve the problem, you will be better for it versus just trying to be like, I want to play my game of 40K and rip it out in 2 hours. I just want to win. But you've made 10 mistakes in that win. That doesn't actually benefit you. Yes, you got the win, but you're not a better player because of it.
Ain't that the truth?
All right, John, is there any final thoughts that you have, especially around the new missions, especially around, we have a bunch of GTs coming up. I'm going to go see Lane this weekend. We're going to just play in a little two-headed giant, just a little fun tournament, but I'm also bringing my Death Guard up there to play multiple games into Lane and Will and Ryan, which will be fun. But also we have the GT down in Austin following that, and the next month it's the Wyoming GT. So yeah, we are rocking and rolling. What do you got planned coming forward for events?
I'm out of town the weekend of the Wyoming GT, unfortunately. So the only 2 events that I have coming up in the near future are the GT around here in August, and then I'm going to Challengers Cup in September. So those are the 2 upcoming ones for me. I have another one planned for October, so a little bit later on the events than I would like, but mostly I just want to make Tau work. I want to figure out a way to make Tau work, and so that's the mission that I'm on, as a content creator as well. I want to do a deep dive on the army. I think there's a few possibilities on ways to go and kind of how to optimize into the meta today. So I am excited to tackle that. But, from like a list building and from the secondary deck perspective, I am still in the preliminary phase. I think the unfortunate thing is I think breachers are good, but do I really invest in like a Cadre Fireblade Breacher package, knowing there's good Overwatches everywhere, right? So that's kind of like the thought process I'm going through is basically like what level of trash is the right trash. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Right now, I'm just going straight damage, seeing how that works, right, with a minimal amount of trash, and then adding from that point forward. So I think it'll be interesting. We'll see how it all shakes out, but I know Tau got a little bit better, and I really want to put my, a good foot forward and try to make the army work as best as I can.
Well, if there's anyone that could do it, John, it's definitely you.
Thanks.
I have been tortured by Ox Cadre enough to know that army has teeth. The problem is you have to use every bit of your brain cells to put a good plan together, especially for a 6-round tournament. So I really hope, I can't wait to see what you and Matt and the other guys come up with in terms of how Tau is going to be effective. So yeah, looking forward to it. All right, we will be signing off, guys. Yeah, we are signing off, guys. I hope you learned something. I know we kind of, talked a lot in terms of generalities about the things that we're doing to be effective and the things that you can do to be effective. But honestly, that is the best way we can deliver this information. Unless we sit down with a list with you in person or over Discord and talk you through the decisions that you're making in an actual game, these bits of advice are the most that we can give in terms of being helpful. We can show games, we can talk about our recaps and the decisions that we made. But John, I think, gave the best piece of advice over all of this that you need to stick in the back of your head, which is go play 40K. None of this works. We can theory craft as much as we want, but until you put the models on the table and roll the dice and make the decisions, you will not know how effective this can or cannot be. So other than that, make sure you leave a comment down below. We keep climbing in subscribers. Apparently y'all love listening to us talk, and we really appreciate the time and energy that you give to us to watch more Mastercrafted. So don't ever forget, victory isn't given, it's forged right here on Mastercrafted. Have a good night, guys.